Welcome to another episode of the Brand Fortress HQ podcast. On this Tactics Tuesday, we're going to talk about how to use AI to create your own Amazon CEO and just other ways to actually leverage AI in order to move your brand forward on Amazon. I'm actually going to turn it over to Mike, you, and Matt, because you guys are kind of the big brains on this. And I've got a couple of experiences and thoughts towards the end, but you guys have really been, kind of pushing the boundaries with AI and how you leverage it to be essentially kind of that Amazon CEO. So love to hear your guys' experience.
Yeah, I'd say go ahead and take the reins, Matt, and then I'll pick up after you.
For about the last, I'm going to say 8 months or so, I've been using other people's custom GPTs. So there's a GPT marketplace for those of you that aren't familiar. I think it's only on the paid plan. So only the $20 pro or plus plan, that you can search for GPTs. And similar to like Facebook groups, there's a custom GPT that was trained specifically on pretty much any topic that you can think of. And like I said, I was using other people's for quite some time. There's one that I used a lot for marketing.
Just a quick clarification on that, Matt. I don't know if you need to be on the paid plan in order to search for them, but you don't need to be on the paid plan in order to use custom GPTs.
Got it. Okay. Oh, yeah, good to know.
So, that's people out there that are like, hey, I ran across this custom GPT. First of all, just be, know where it came from, because obviously somebody has programmed that and they might have done it well, they might have not, all kinds of different things that could happen with that, just like a piece of software. But in order to use those custom GPTs, you can use them on the free version of ChatGPT.
Got it. That's a very good clarification, and that's actually a really good segue too, because I got a lot of use out of the GPTs that I was using from other people, but I went through a training that taught you how to create them yourself, which now that I know how to create them myself, but I use ChatGPT to help me create. We'll kind of talk about that as we go on, but it's not as heavy of a lift as it sounds. It sounds overwhelming to create a custom GPT, and it is like 12 to 14 different training files. But like I said, I leveraged ChatGPT to help me walk through that map and also walk through the creation of them. But anyways, I went through a training that was called AI Command Center. And basically the idea of the AI Command Center was using a collection of custom GPTs. And what I learned and didn't know at the time is that custom GPTs are powerful, but bringing multiple custom GPTs into the same conversation is 1,000 times more powerful. So that's what this AI Command Center concept was essentially, is creating basically a digital CEO. They called it the organizational GPT, but to me, it makes more sense to call it the digital CEO. But essentially, it knows everything that the actual CEO. I created one for ProTuff, and it knows everything. And actually, I used Mike actually extracted everything that his ChatGPT knew about ProTuff, extracted it out into one big giant report that I then used on top of a deep research report that I created, and kind of synthesized all of that together to create the training files for the ProTuff Digital CEO, which knows as much as Mike does about ProTuff, and actually has the power of ChatGPT to go out and do more stuff and learn more stuff. So that's kind of where it starts, is this digital CEO. But then there's like departmental CEOs. If you continue on with this kind of organizational structure of them, the digital CEO knows everything the CEO knows. Then you have your departmental GPTs, like your marketing and sales and data analysis and things like that. So marketing was the one that I started out because that's what we needed it for. I created a chief marketing GPT that was trained on how to market specifically a physical product on Amazon, TikTok, Walmart, all the different platforms. So again, 12 different training documents on exactly how specifically on Amazon and TikTok and PPC and DSP and things like that. So then under that, you have your specialty GPTs. I have, for example, a TikTok affiliate success manager one. We have a creator connections campaign on Amazon that we launched, and we have about 20 or 30 creators that we work with on a regular basis. And our admin uses this collection of custom GPTs to talk to each other, to respond to these creators in a very systematized way, in a very similar voice, which is our voice. And it's been fed so many different things to be trained on. So essentially, that's kind of the idea, is that you're using this collection of custom GPTs in a way that they're trained on not only the brand and everything that comes with that, all of the SKUs, but then also how to market it, but then how to have conversations with affiliates with it.
So Matt, quick question for those that, aren't super familiar with, custom GPTs or chat GPT in general. Um, why, why not just have like one big GPT where you just feed everything into it and then just ask it questions? Why have, kind of the CEO, and then why have these specialized GPTs for marketing and TikTok affiliates and those types of things?
So the biggest problem that I had with ChatGPT as I was learning to use it for the brands that I work directly with is that every time I wanted to start a conversation, I had to go back and start with a whole bunch of context, whether it be because I work with 5, 6, 8 different brands at a time. So I have to start with, okay, this is the brand that I'm talking about. This is their products. This all the stuff that basically a CEO would know. And I had to start every conversation with that context and then give it the context of what I wanted to do. And then give it the context of all the information that I was giving it to help me help me. So that's a big, long process. So essentially what a custom GPT allows you to do is pre-train it on a very specific thing. So breaking that up, similar to at a company, like when you get to be a big enough company to require hiring more than 5 people, naturally those people fall into different departments, customer service or sales or something along those lines. So there's that separation because that person specializes in that one particular thing for that brand. The same thing is true with ChatGPT is when you give it a very specific task and can pre-train it on it, you remove that whole process of having to give it background in the first place and you can just go straight to town. So now for me, creating an email, I use 3 custom GPTs in that process, but I can literally pump out a 3 email copy for 3 different emails in a series in 3 minutes now, as opposed to the day that it took before.
And it's also, I think part of what John might have also been asking is, if you're talking custom GPTs, why not create just one giant custom GPT that knows everything instead of all of these separate ones that you're bringing into the conversation? And I think the 2 things that I would say that are the most important reasons that you might want to do that is, one, everything that I had.
Oh, I'm sure Mike was going to make a very good point, but just as a reminder that this podcast is live, he just cut out. So I'm sure he's going to say something really important.
Yeah.
That said, so again, and he's probably going to say something. Oh, here he comes back. So we'll let him finish. So you just cut out, Mike. You were saying something about why it's important to have each one of them have a job. It was very suspenseful. So anybody who was listening, I'm sure
I was on the edge of my seat.
The needles of what you have to say.
I think the government tried to shut me down. I don't know.
We'll have to edit that out.
No, I think the 2 biggest reasons why that's important is, one, AI, at least right now. We still get situations where, it hallucinates. It still gives incorrect, information sometimes. And I think that the more broad its information base, the more likely it is to do that. And so in a sense, that's why when you're just talking with the normal chat GPT and you're not giving it a whole lot of context, you're not, telling it, okay, pretend you are this sort of person, or whatever, it tends to hallucinate more in those situations, or it tends to give poor responses more frequently when you do that because it's working on a much more generalized knowledge base. When you do a custom GPT, having it specialize in something very specific and giving it instructions that tells it, this is the way I want you to think. This is the kind of person I want you to be like. This is the experience that I want you to pretend that you have. It kind of extracts, first of all, it takes the information you give it in the knowledge base, which is very specific. But then also, this is my theory, is I think it also extracts from its own generalized knowledge base the parts of it that are important for what you want it to do. And it kind of sets aside a lot of the rest of that knowledge base. And so it's much less likely to make mistakes. So that's thing 1. Thing 2, though, I think, is related to something that we used to do in the early days when ChatGPT first came out. This is something that I was doing. And even back then, it was powerful. Now it's 10 times more powerful. But when you have GPTs or AIs talk to themselves, but you give them different personalities or different experience bases. So I used to take, and instead of having a conversation myself with ChatGPT, I would tell ChatGPT, I want to develop this new product in such and such a category. So I want you to have a simulated conversation between a materials expert, an engineering expert, and a product launch expert or product development expert or something like that. So these three people are going to have a conversation about what products we might launch. And what happens in that conversation then is so you tell it, this person has such and such experience in, product development, yada, yada, yada. You tell it, you give it a little background on each of those three people, and then you say, go. And it just continues this conversation all the way down the page between these three very distinct individuals who would come at this problem from a very different perspective and with a very different knowledge base. And what happens is you get much more creative and much more useful responses at the end of it. So the same thing is true here. By creating multiple very specialized ChatGPTs that you then integrate into the conversation that are in a sense kind of talking to each other, you get a much more well-rounded response to whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I just think in the end, you're getting a much better result.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a good point of, being so specific with the different ChatGPTs and telling it, like giving it context, because really otherwise it has, it's almost like having a conversation with an entry level employee. Like if you just out of the blue say, hey, I need you to come up with a new product for this brand, like their brain's going to explode. There's a million different directions they're going to go in, and you're going to get a whole bunch of bad ideas before you finally get a good one. But if you said, hey, I need a product that does this, is made of these materials, does this, like now they can actually do something with that to research what does that look like. And even better with ChatGPT, you can actually say, okay, to what you were saying, Mike, what would an expert look at in this situation? And I think where I've found this the most valuable recently is, and Matt, you've been working on it quite a bit with some of our clients where, developing a GPT that looks at, for example, like how do you build out or quickly building out briefs for a product listing image stacks. And what I found really interesting out of that is that it pulled in some ideas that like weren't really, on our radar or other options that I thought was really useful. But then I also noticed that there were other things that I've seen as best practices around like, okay, make sure that your key benefit or unique selling proposition like is in one of the first images. So that way people understand like, why would I buy from your brand, in this product over, some other brand's product. And kind of those things that I think are a little more advanced, don't necessarily come up, pre-programmed in the box for ChatGPT. And so you just really get the best of both worlds if you have somebody that has that expertise, and then also using ChatGPT to kind of combine those two things together. And I think that's where really the magic happens. So it's not about like, hey, ChatGPT is just going to take over, all of Amazon and all of marketing. It's really, okay, identifying what is the 70% of what ChatGPT that gives you that is really good, and then what is the 30% that it's missing because it's not general knowledge.
That example that you gave, that custom GPT, I think I call it Amazon Image Optimizer GPT, I think is the name of it. It's a really, really good example of how I feel like I have a superpower now because I know how to create a custom GPT. Or in the aggregator tool that we use, it's called a project. And actually, custom GPT has projects now that you can actually train very similarly to a custom GPT. So anyways, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. But like we had probably about 3 or 4 different clients that were going through an Amazon image refresh, or they were launching a new product or a product line that they needed new images for. So we had a need for that. So because I had that skill of being able to build a custom GPT, it took me about 40 minutes, and that's optimized now. Like I've gotten that down from a couple of hours to about 30 to 40 minutes to create a custom GPT. I use ChatGPT to go out and find everything that all best practice and aggregate all of that data. I think it, like for that specific GPT, it used 37 different websites for the data that it pulled in, for the psychology of each image in the stack on Amazon. And it came back and I built these, I think there's like 10 or 11 different training docs for that specific GPT. And we created it. It went through the process. So for a client, I brought in their digital CEO. I told it what we wanted. Then we brought in the image optimizer. We told it all the USPs. We gave it their website. We gave it their brand intelligence guide that we use to train the digital CEO. And then we had it go out and say, okay, so based on all those best practices, give us what you would suggest for each stack in, or each image in the stack. And what we learned, and John brought this example up, is that some of the jobs that it told us for a particular image weren't what we know to be best practice. So we had that conversation, and then we went back to that training document and we updated it based on what we know to be best practice for the second image in the stack, specifically the two main USPs called out in one image. So we changed it. We updated the knowledge base after we ran it through for a couple of clients, and now it knows that for the next one. So that, again, I told you it would take me 3 minutes from start to finish to do an email campaign. It also would take me about 5 minutes now to do a campaign or a image stack brief for our designer, where before that would take me multiple hours. Now I can do it in 5 minutes. So that's the power of using these collection of custom GPTs and being able to create ones to fit a specific purpose.
I also think that one of the things that causes people the most problem with trying to use AI is that I think oftentimes the idea that we have in our head in terms of what we need ChatGPT to help us with, I think oftentimes we're in the middle of the conversation and we need to back up and kind of re-engineer where we should have started in the conversation. And what I mean by that is when we have an idea about something, we'll go in and we just kind of type in a prompt and we're looking for ChatGPT to make magic, right? But the thing that makes GPT or Grok, or we keep talking about ChatGPT, but honestly, Claude is exceptionally good. Sonnet 4, Opus 4.1 are amazing. So it's not like you have to use ChatGPT, but any of these AI models, the thing that makes them most amazing in my mind is oftentimes the things that it tells me that I should be thinking about that I'm not thinking about. And so what I'll often do is my first prompt really is basically expressing to ChatGPT, this is where I am in the process. What did I forget? Where should I go back to? What questions should I be asking that maybe I haven't already asked? What information should I be trying to find that maybe I haven't already looked for? Letting it ask me questions about this process before I delve into the actual conversation and trying to move forward. I try to move backward first. It is shocking to me the number of times that I enter into a conversation with GPT and recognize I'm not even in the ballpark of where I actually should be in that conversation and the direction that I should be moving, because there was these other pieces that didn't even occur to me that I should be thinking about. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, well, let's start there then, let's move from there. So I think that's thing one. Thing two is don't look at it as like a genie in the lamp, where you rub the lamp and you get your magic answer the first try, or even in the first 3 tries, let's say. You need to keep going with that conversation and keep iterating on that conversation until you get where you want to go. And sometimes that takes some time. And so I think that's a big value piece there. One of the things that I would point out with that is that that's one of the value pieces of that custom GPT, is that a lot of times that process of going through that prompt is giving it all that background. So having that custom GPT to start with that already has all that background saves a massive amount of time. And so it's really a good idea. Other platforms have similar functions to a custom GPT. So if you're not using ChatGPT, figure out what that function is in the other platform that you're using.
Do they? Because I haven't seen this with, I've messed around a little bit with Gemini and that type of stuff, and I haven't seen it yet.
Gemini had something. I was in there the other day, and I could swear, I don't remember what, gems? Are they called gems?
All this stuff changes,
I think they're called gems. Now,
Okay.
I didn't play around with it that much because I don't work in there that much. Most of my time, and this is probably a good segue. Most of my time these days is spent using an aggregation service. Now, there's multiple of them out there. I know there's one called Magi or Magi that Matt has used in the past. I kind of latched onto Abacus, which I like quite well. I've never used Magi. Maybe it's even better, but Abacus is what we use as a company. And to clarify, an aggregator service, essentially what it does is it provides you with access to all of the different AI models at any given moment. So anytime I start a chat, I can do one of two things. I can either allow Abacus to decide which chat model to utilize in response to my prompt. And basically, what it's doing is it's using past data to establish what we have determined over time is this type of question is best answered by this model. So maybe it chooses ChatGPT 5.0, or it chooses, Claude Anthropic. Maybe it uses Opus 4.1 or whatever. And you get charged a certain number of credits based on, the amount of processing and the type of model that you use, because some models are more expensive than others, at least via API. But you have access to everything, and that's not just, Grok and Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini. It's also Midjourney and Flux and all of these different types of AI models that are either image generators or video generators, or all of these various different models that you could use, DeepSeek and all of these more exotic things that a lot of people don't touch. All of them are accessible, and so you can either let Abacus choose, or you can specifically select which model you would like to use for this particular prompt. For me, whenever it's a prompt that I'm like, I really need some serious thinking power in this, there are certain models that I go to that I feel are better with logic and reasoning. I'll often use Claude Sonnet 4. If I really need something good, quite frankly, I'll often use Claude Opus 4.1, which uses a lot of credits, but I get to the answer. I was actually having a conversation with one of my employees earlier today. So one of the things that I think oftentimes when people are using these aggregators, because it'll show you how many credits you used, and you purchase a certain number of credits, based on your plan, you get a certain number of credits every month. And so a lot of times what people will do is they're like, oh, like I know that GPT 4.1 would use like 5 credits for this prompt. And if I use Opus, it's going to be like 20. So I'm going to use 4.1. But the problem is you're asking it a question that, reasonably speaking, is a little bit over its head. And so what happens is it takes 4 or 5 or 6 prompts to actually get to where you need to be in that conversation, to where you get a real answer. Well, now you've already used those 20, credits, but you've also now wasted the time of going through multiple prompts to get there. So you're better off sometimes using that more advanced model that might use 4 or 5, 6 times the credits, but you're going to get the right answer right out of the gate based on that first prompt that you put in, rather than spending another 10 minutes, reiterating the prompt and changing this and going and doing this. So it's one of the reasons I really like aggregators, because I'm not always convinced that ChatGPT is the best model for what it is that I'm trying to do. And so it allows me to choose the model that I want. And for image generation, like if you use ChatGPT for image generation, it's not bad. It can do some pretty decent images. But if you get more specific, and I want to use Midjourney, or I want to use Flux, or I want to use whatever, I can do all of that right inside of Abacus. I don't have to go out and go to Midjourney. I don't have to go out and go to Flux, or whatever. It's all in that same system, and it's actually cheaper because I don't have to pay for Midjourney and ChatGPT and Grok and Claude and all of these. I don't have to have a service on any of them. I pay for Abacus, and Abacus uses their API to connect into all of these other services, and I don't have to pay for any of them. So if you want access to a lot of those other models, especially at varied types of models, for video and images and things like that, using an aggregator could be a way to do that in a way that doesn't break the bank, for your business, but gives you access to a lot of the tools that you're looking for.
I mean, it saved me money, and it gave me access to more things.
So I'm curious, kind of taking a little bit of a sidestep here. One of the other things, because we talked a lot about custom GPTs, but there are other tools now out there that essentially act like custom GPTs, but across multiple platforms. That I know that's something that I'm starting to look into with my agency, and looking at leveraging that, so that way custom GPTs are great. But again, back to what you were talking about, Mike, of like, okay, well, if we can get a better result out of, Gemini versus ChatGPT, like we just care what, model gives us the best result. I'm not married to, ChatGPT versus Grok or, whatever.
Well, an abacus is actually nice in that regard. And again, Matt could speak to Magi and how it functions. But so within abacus, you create essentially a custom GPT, and abacus is called a project. Now, they're not exactly the same thing, but they're similar. So when you start a project in abacus, you give it a knowledge base and you give it a set of custom instructions, which is pretty much what a custom GPT is. When you do a custom GPT, you give it a knowledge base and then you give it its custom instructions, and then you go from there, right? You're off to the races. So in that sense, they're identical. What's nice though about abacus projects is that then you have access to exactly what you're suggesting, John, which is one, you can open up a new project chat, and now it automatically has access to all of that knowledge base and the custom instructions that you gave it, which is kind of who are you, how do you think, what kind of, like all that kind of thing. But then when you start the conversation, again, same as any other chat in abacus, you can either let abacus choose which model it should use to answer the questions. And by the way, I should clarify, that model can change at any point in the conversation. So I can start with, like, I start the conversation, and let's say I just let abacus choose. I ask it a question, and it decides Gemini 2.5 is the right model. So it answers the question. Then I follow that with another, question or reply. Abacus might decide, okay, well, now in this point of the conversation, Claude Sonnet 4 is better, or ChatGPT this is better, or whatever, and it will switch models at will. You can then also click regenerate. If it gives you an answer and you don't really like it and you think there's a different model that might work better, it'll give you suggestions of other models that you could have tried. You can regenerate that answer with a different model, but also same thing, you can choose. So at any point in that conversation, I can change it and say, use Claude Sonnet 4. Or, now I'm at this point in the conversation, I'm like, oh, we need to use Flux right now because I want to do an image or, whatever. So you're in that project. It still has all the context, all of that information, just like a custom GPT. But now you can use any model you want within that chat.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of just important takeaways for listeners out of that, of what you just said, Mike. So the first one is that it means you have the right tool for the job, in the sense of, or the best tool for the job. It's like, if you reach into your toolbox and you're like, okay, I need to, pound in a nail. Okay, well, if the only thing you have is a wrench, like, yeah, you can make it work, but, a hammer would be a lot nicer. And so that's kind of, as we're starting to see these different tools, kind of mature, they're good at different things. And having something like that aggregator or abacus or whatever gives you access to all the tools in the toolbox. I think the other important thing that what we've found, and again, we primarily use ChatGPT, but just, from what you're bringing up, which is it allows you to keep the results consistent. So, okay, which model gave us the best results. And so then if you're having your team use that consistently, that same project over and over again, like, hey, here are the parameters that give us the best outcome given this project that we may do multiple times a day, right. We may do, use tons and tons of time, or do many, many times in order to get a really consistent result that actually does have a very positive impact on the business by, allowing you to speed up processes and deliver a lot faster than your competitors, which is super important, especially on Amazon.
Well, and if you're a team, I mean, also just the cost. Like, as you said, different tools are good at different things. You could easily be subscribed to 20 different AI services, that do the various things within your business that you need done. And this tool is better for this, or this tool is better for this, or this tool is better for this. Or you might be subscribed to 5 of them, and you're like, look, this one is not the best at this thing. but it's good enough at this thing, and I don't want to pay for the one that's the best for it because then I got another subscription that I'm paying. So we're going to
Yep.
stick to these 3 or 4 or 5 tools. Whereas with the aggregator, it gives you access to all of the tools under one subscription price. And if you're a team, like if you got ChatGPT and you're a team like ours where you got 10 people, well, I got
Gets
to pay for a
expensive
seat
really
for
fast.
every single one of those 10
Yep.
people. Good Lord, the price adds up. And if I need multiple tools, multiple AIs, that's an astronomical amount of money. And most of the time, some of those tools you're paying for, you only use occasionally. So having access to them through an aggregator is way less expensive.
Yeah, I think we've covered some good ground with this conversation. I know that there's a lot more that we could talk about. I do think this is probably a good place to wrap for today. So with that in mind, maybe I'll start with you, Matt. One kind of action item you'd have for brand owners who are listening right now and are looking for more ways to leverage AI in their business. What advice would you have, or action item would you have for them?
So I kind of use ChatGPT as my security blanket. So most of the 2 tips that I'm going to give right now are very ChatGPT focused. First of all, if you've never used a ChatGPT, that's where I would start. Is go to the ChatGPT or the custom GPT marketplace and find one. For example, there's Alex Hormozy wrote a book called $100 Million Offers. So go find that $100 million offer GPT and have it help create the Grand Slam offer for your business. That will take you 5 minutes to find that GPT and use it. If you have used a custom GPT before and you've gotten value out of it, learn how to create your own. It's not as overwhelming as you think it is. I've gotten the process down now to about 20 to 30 minutes for a decent custom GPT that I can use over and over and over and over again. So that's what I would challenge you is start using them if you haven't, and start creating them if you already understand the power of them.
And I guess for me, honestly, just kind of piggybacking on that, I think, that idea of creating your own custom GPT sounds, maybe daunting to some people. To others, it's old hat. They've been doing it for months. But if it seems daunting, I think remembering that you can use AI to help you use AI. Okay. It's a very meta kind of concept, right? Like
Mhm.
it's hard for people to wrap their brains around that. Like I was literally having dinner with somebody the other day, some good friends of ours, and he uses AI a little bit. Um, Never occurred to him that he could use AI to help him understand how to better use AI. Just didn't occur. And so we were talking about that. It was like, mind blown. So if there's something that you think you might want to use AI for, but you don't actually know how to use AI for it, ask AI how to use AI for that. It will tell you. And you'll be amazed at just how good that response will be. And it can walk you through that process in a very systematic, kind of methodical way. Um, the other thing, this is just kind of a quick tip, is that it's not uncommon that when you ask a question of AI, it will give you like this giant, especially if it's something that's fairly involved, right? And it's like if you're asking it, how do I do X, Y, Z, right? And it's kind of a step by step. It'll give you the whole thing all at once, and you're like, oh, geez. And then if there's some kind of maybe not mistake, but there's some problem in there that you can't work through, then you're backtracking over and over again, right? So in a situation like that where I'm asking an AI to give me a step by step, I am very specific to tell it only give me the next step in the process. As soon as we successfully complete that step, then give me the next step. And don't give me any more steps until we successfully complete the step we're on. It makes your chats better, first of all, because a chat, you can only have so many tokens, basically so many characters, let's say, that go on inside of a chat. So the longer it goes, the more likely an AI is to hallucinate. So if it gives you this long answer and all you really needed was this little piece, you just wasted all of that, right? So don't have it do that. Have it give you the little piece, little piece, little piece, and you'll be able to get to the end of that conversation without running out of tokens and having it start hallucinating on you.
Yeah, and then what I would throw out there, just as an action item for viewers, is think about something that you do, you know, on a regular basis. So the example that I think of that has just been incredibly useful for me is that, I'm the in addition to being the founder and CEO for the Amazon agency I run, I'm also the chief revenue officer, which means I'm responsible for, all the sales calls and follow-ups with people and that type of stuff. Um, I'm a decent email copywriter, but it's been so helpful to say, okay, I actually have a little GPT. It's not super complicated that I just, take the email that I write and put it into the GPT and say, hey, make this email more engaging and persuasive. And really what I find out of that is that it takes the pressure off from me of having to write the perfect email, because I can come up with, okay, here's kind of my ideas and put out, kind of what I want to say. I put it in chat GPT and I'm like, okay, I really like this that it came up with, this other piece, and the 7 M dashes that put in there, aren't a good fit, but I got enough good ideas from it, because there's been enough times where I've looked at something and be like, because I customize every one to make it engaging and that type of stuff of like, hey, why is, uh, what does that next step look like, and being excited about, working together. So it just does a really good job of almost being like that writing partner. And so it doesn't have to be something where it's, building a new product or, massive project in order to be useful. Sometimes just, things that you do day to day in order to give you almost like another person to bounce ideas off of, and to, really just make things go faster. So yeah, I would encourage people to just look at, what are the day-to-day things you do, and can, how can you test, leverage it, or using ChatGPT in order to solve those. So with that, I think this is a great place to wrap on AI. Obviously, this will continue to change, and we'll have another conversation in 6 months, and that, the entire AI landscape will have changed. And we'll have more fun things to talk about then. So until then, thank you everybody for listening.